The Oklahoma City Thunder were the 2025 NBA champions, but there was one big question. Can Oklahoma City keep this team going forward? It's already been a very busy summer for OKC, and it's very easy to see why people would ask that question. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander got a new contract, 4 years, $285 million, making him the highest paid player ever. Chet Holmgren just got a max contract, 5 years, $250 million. And Jalen Williams is about to get a very similar deal, 5 years, $250 million, with a chance to become $290. And because of all these new contracts, fans think that the Thunder will be screwed in a year or two, and eventually they'll meet the second apron. People are comparing this to 2012 when the Thunder got rid of James Harden because they didn't want to pay the luxury tax. But what if I told you that all of this is the furthest thing from the truth? The new CBA and its restrictions have been known for a while now, and the Thunder have been preparing. Since the rebuild has started in 2020, the Thunder have prioritized one thing: creating the most flexible team possible in today's NBA. When the Thunder accumulated so many draft picks in return for all their pieces, taking on bad contracts and getting involved in every way, they weren't doing it with the primary objective to just get the next superstar. It was to give them the most chances at good, homegrown players and flexibility to get the guys they want going forward. Homegrown players are the most valuable asset in the NBA if you're good at finding them. If you're a good drafting team and you can draft a good player, that means you get 4 years of complete, cheap labor with team control. If you're extremely good at this, there's no limit to how long your team's success can run. Look at San Antonio and their dynasty with Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker. The Thunder just won a championship exploiting this exactly. One of the best role players on the team and a player who started over half their games in the regular season, Cason Wallace, is on the second year of his rookie contract and is extremely cheap right now. The Thunder drafted him at 19 years old and he still has 2 years left of playing for practically free. But this also goes for the Thunder's second and third best players, Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. J-Dub was drafted 12th in the draft in 2022. He still has 1 year left on his rookie deal, but he was on his rookie contract while being a second option on an NBA Finals team. Obviously, finding a player like that is so rare, but you can see the reason why the Thunder are so deep. The best players are extremely cheap. Same goes for Chet Holmgren, who's clearly a top 3 player on that team. Both Jalen and Chet are practically playing at an all-star plus level while being paid way less than the max currently. So again, drafting these young players basically lets you get a much deeper roster around them. Now, I don't expect the Thunder to draft another Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren in this era. That's extremely rare. But drafting the next Cason Wallace, drafting the next player who can be a quality starter for your team for very cheap is what the goal is here. I bring up San Antonio because that's exactly what they did around their big three, Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and the Thunder will have to do the same around Shai, Chet, and Jalen. So the primary objective for the Thunder going forward, continue to reset that 4-year clock and get new talent. Nikola Topic is a player who's shown a lot of flashes in Summer League and was one of the most intriguing prospects in his draft class. If he ends up being good, the Thunder have another few years of a good player being paid little to nothing. And the best part for players like this, it's much more easy to retain them than players you get from other teams. Since you drafted them with your own rights, you get restricted free agency, you get specific matching tools, stuff like that. The Thunder's window of being an insanely cheap team obviously comes to a close this season. The loss where their second and third best players are playing for practically free in J-Dub and Chet. But again, all of this was already known and all of this was already planned. Sam Presti signed Isaiah Hartenstein to a huge deal. 3 years, $90 million, knowing that he only has a limited time of having a lot of cap space. Sam Presti knew, my team's going to be cheap, I have a lot of money, why not secure a good player, a good starter, and a good fit on this team? That's why the Thunder were so comfortable overpaying Hartenstein to an extent, because they knew it didn't matter and all they had to do was get over the hump for a championship, which they did. I think since the signing happened and how it was structured, it was pretty obvious that this was going to be a short-term affair. Hartenstein gets a lot of money, while the Thunder get the last piece to contend. The Thunder will 100% lose some players over time, and Hartenstein is 100% one of them. But the Thunder are prepared for this, and they have been for a while. For one, look at Jalen Williams' development, the Arkansas big. He replicates a lot of skills that Hartenstein does, like dribble handoffs, short roll passing, and overall his screening game, and he adds a 3-point shot. But the main thing here is that they extended him on a very team-friendly contract, 3 years, $24 million. And this is just another string of another cheap role player contract that the Thunder have got. Jalen Williams, Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, AJ Mitchell. They keep extending these rotation players for extremely cheap. Isaiah Joe, who was always a pivotal rotation player in the regular season, is making less than 6% of the cap in 2029. Aaron Wiggins had legit contributions in the NBA Finals, and he's going to make less than 3% of the cap in 2030. For players who consistently grade as positive players, these are extremely cheap numbers, not to mention that these players are before their prime. Since they're all in their low to middle 20s, there's still a chance they could take a leap and go from a solid role player to an extremely impactful player. And all these cost-effective contracts do is ensure that the Thunder will have a decent rotation going forward around their big three of SGA, J-Dub, and Chet. Almost all of these contracts are low risk, high reward for the Thunder, and you can see why Sam Presti is so praised. The other insurance that the Thunder put in Hartenstein's departure was drafting Thomas Sorber at number 15. He's one of the highest field bigs in the class, one of the better defensive bigs overall, who will take a rookie season likely playing behind Chet, Hartenstein, and potentially Jay Will at times. I think Mark Daigneault and the Thunder have fallen in love with the double big look that they did with Chet and Hartenstein, so once Hartenstein leaves, they need some players who can replace that, and I think they like that in Thomas Sorber. Sorber has some shooting potential, but the main appeal with him is that he can move really well for his size, and he's very good on defense. He reads the floor very well, and that's what you need next to Chet. You need another high field big like Hartenstein, so Sorber will be able to fit that mold. And again, like I mentioned earlier in the video, he's a new, fresh rookie, so that's a new 4-year clock he'll be giving the Thunder of cheap production all the way up until the end of the decade. When looking at the Thunder's future contracts, another way they're going to be able to maximize their flexibility is because they have a lot of team options. Having team options instead of player options means you're able to dictate what players stay, how to rearrange the cap, when to extend players, and you have overall control on which contracts they can keep. For example, Lou Dort in 2026 to 2027 is on a team-friendly deal, but the Thunder have his team option, so they can decide to decline it and extend him on an even longer team-friendly deal that benefits both sides, and they do this a lot. The overall idea is, if you decline one of the cheaper years and add it to his new projected contract, you can average it out for a lower annual contract. That's a bit hard to understand, so I'll try to explain it this way. These aren't the real numbers, but let's say Lou Dort was making $10 million in 2026 to 2027. But on his upcoming extension, Lou Dort is asking for $80 million over 4 years, or $20 million a year. Since the Thunder don't want to mess up their future cap and don't want to spend $20 million on Lou Dort in 4 or 5 years, what they can do is lower that number by adding in his team option. So instead, $90 million over 5 years, and you get an $18 million average. It's best case for both sides. The player gets all their money, and the team gets a lower annual average for most of their seasons. Another thing that will help the Thunder is that they just don't have bad contracts. Their only paid long-term vet is Alex Caruso, and he's really a guy that the Thunder will keep until he regresses. He signed for 4 years, $81 million to $20.5 a year, which is pretty low for a guy with that level of defensive impact. But if the Thunder ever need to trade him, it should be pretty easy because a defensive guy like that will always have some appeal in the NBA. But let's say worst comes to worst and he regresses really heavily and he has no value. The Thunder have the draft picks to attach to him and get rid of him without feeling too much regret. That's what draft picks is. Draft picks are power, so the Thunder will never be tied to a guy and not be able to get rid of them like some other teams are right now. But there's one big question. How will the Thunder avoid the second apron and the penalties that have scared teams like the Celtics over the last few years? But before we do that, we have to answer what is the second apron in the first place. The second apron is basically a hard cap. Once you reach the second apron, you basically can't do anything. You won't be able to access the taxpayer and mid-level exception, which is a great way to get free agents. Any trade exceptions that you have are no longer valid and you can't use them. You can't trade multiple players together, so for example, if I want to trade for Kevin Durant, I cannot package Isaiah Hartenstein and Lou Dort for him. You also can't trade first round picks past 5 years in the future, which is a pretty big deal during bigger trades. And if you remain in the second apron for multiple years, your first round pick is moved to the end of the draft. So your pick, even if it's pick number 5, it becomes pick number 30 automatically. So yeah, if you're in the second apron, you're basically stuck and there's no way you can improve your team. Next season, the Thunder are absolutely set. They're actually $8.5 million below the first apron, let alone the second. But 2026 to 2027 is when the J-Dub and Chet extensions kick in, where Shai, Dub, and Chet will combine for about $120 million. But that's the thing, the Thunder will have so many team options between Kenrich, Hartenstein, and Dort worth a combined $50 million that'll help them get below the second apron, and I'd expect Hartenstein and Kenrich to depart at this point. 2028 will be the first season where the Thunder will actually start to feel some struggles because SGA Supermax will kick in. At that point, that's where the Thunder will have to start making decisions. Who do I want to keep between guys like Lou Dort and Kiss and Wallace? Alex Caruso would probably have to go. But again, the entire point is that the Thunder have so many draft picks, the Thunder have so many assets that they'll be able to find guys over the next 3 seasons to replace them. When Sam Presti was asked about the overall second apron and the repeater tax, he said he doesn't expect the Thunder to ever reach it during the CBA. Another thing that will be a key contributor here is if J-Dub and Chet will make All-NBA next season. For Chet, it won't matter that much because the Thunder already put in his new contract that even if he makes All-NBA, his cap won't rise that much. Usually if a max rookie makes All-NBA, they go all the way to 30% of the cap. For Chet, he's only going to go up to 26. Now I can't say the same for J-Dub. I think he'll probably get the full 30% escalator if he makes All-NBA. So I guess the Thunder might have some rooting interest against J-Dub making All-NBA next season, but again, it doesn't really matter for Chet, only J-Dub most likely. But the thing is, despite the Thunder having 3 max contracts, J-Dub and Chet will still be relatively cheap because of rookie max contracts, only Shai's on a true supermax deal. Compare that to the Boston Celtics, who had 2 supermax players in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, or the Phoenix Suns, who had 2 supermax players in Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and a max player in Devin Booker. So yes, the Thunder will eventually have some questions on who they're going to keep between guys like Dort, Caruso, and Wallace in like 2028. No matter what, the Thunder will be able to stay below the second apron, not face repeater taxes with the entire core free, while also keeping a good amount of role players. Players like Nikola Topic, AJ Mitchell, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, Thomas Sorber, Jay Will, and a combination of guys like Caruso, Jordan Wallace will all be under contract assuming there's no major trade. Then you also add the fact that the Thunder have multiple 2026 first round picks, multiple 2027 first round picks, and they're probably going to add another guy in the core that we haven't talked about yet. So are the Thunder screwed? Absolutely not. In fact, they're probably in the best situation in the NBA to tackle the problem of the second apron. 99% of you guys watching are not subscribed, so I really appreciate if you guys help me there. If you guys have any comments about the Thunder or anything about the video, please comment down below and like. I also have a page where I do Thunder content exclusively at Thunder Focus, so if you want to check that out, obviously I'll leave it in the comments. But again, I appreciate it if you still are listening to the video. Thank you.